Welcome to day 5 of US-India Summit, focus on US-India opportunity and the new challenges. We're delighted that one of the most dynamic minister from India, Rama Rao, has joined us. And one thing I can say in my experience, every time I've reached out on an issue, he has been responsive, reactive, and solved the problem in a win-win fashion. So we're delighted, Mr. Rama Rao, that you have joined us, and we look forward to the conversation. I am going to invite Mark Ellen, board member USISPF, and senior vice president at Boeing and member of the executive council to make his opening remarks. Mark, over to you.
Mukesh, thanks very much. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Minister Rama Rao, it's a real pleasure to meet with you again, and thank you for your time with this group. Maybe what I'll do, if it's okay, is just to set the scene a little bit. This is the final day of a very unique USISPF annual leadership summit, and obviously a very unique year. Over the last 4 days, we've heard the visionary messages from the leaders across India and the United States about the relationship between the US and India at a time where it's more dynamic than ever, and where the alignment of interests is perhaps more clear than ever. One of the common themes that's been emerging from the leadership message has been that we have a chance now to define what the new century will be like, built on the shared values across our nations. And of course, there's much that US and India share. We talk about vibrant democracy, we talk about free market, and we talk also about the fact that governance, decisive leadership, and entrepreneurial spirit necessary to drive these nations forward is common to both. We're in the middle of an election season. The dynamicism of our election season is going to, I think, actually speak to the value of democracy, just as we've seen in dynamic Indian elections before. And then in terms of enterprises, when I think about Indian enterprises that are working to build, recruit, and grow in the states, the connection of the federalist aspect of that, the state-driven aspect of leadership and economy, is very similar to, of course, what we experience here in the United States. We have proud and vibrant states here, just as in India. And that connection, that understanding, is something unique that links us, that I think we'll see today as we talk with Minister Rama Rao. Telangana is a shining example of what it means to really think seriously about being business and investor friendly. There's a reason why the state consistently tops the top of the ease of doing business rankings. There's no surprise then that so much investment has poured in, $25 billion in the last few years, growing, I think, over 35%, just remarkable. That forward-looking set of policies has led us to find a very robust ecosystem for aerospace. Manufacturing is happening there. Innovation is happening there. We're doing it with our partner, Tata. We have a JV there that makes not just for India, but for the world, not just for military airplanes, but also for commercial airplane parts. So we're seeing the robustness of the state lead to our industry, our business growing more robust as well. As we navigate our way through the challenges that are in front of us as an industry and a world, we're looking to keep partnering with the state as we do that. It's going to be important to recognize that together we're confronting this adversity, and we're going to need that closer engagement to navigate through the new reality. But again, the regulatory agility that we've seen from Telangana has been something that's assured us of business continuity and essential services in our manufacturing facilities during this time. That means everything to us at Boeing. Having an integrated logistics policy that enables swift supply chains and smooth functioning of approvals is also, right at the top of our minds. So TSI Pass is a great example of that. It's going to be important for Telangana to lead the way, not just for companies in its bounds, but also as a thought leader across India, because this is something that, again, at a federalist level, if the states can come together, do this together, it will move the whole, and that will help the broader US-India relationship overall. I'm confident that together we will capture a larger share of supply chains for manufacturing, for technology, for services, for healthcare, for innovation. I just think there's a ton of opportunity and value there. So I've been speaking at a sprint because I just am so excited about what the week's been and how much has been inside it that I wanted to be able to share some of that with you before we start today. But I'll slow us down and let us turn to the real focus of today, now that the scene is set, with the conversation. And so for the conversation, Rajiv Agarwal who is head of country for Uber, is going to lead us into the conversation with the minister. Rajiv, I'll pass the baton over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark, and a very good morning, a very good evening to the Honorable Minister and everyone. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we have seen that earlier too, in my days in DPIT and now out here. Telangana is simply amazing. So it's indeed my honor and privilege to introduce Shri Rama Rao, the Honorable Minister for IT, Municipal Administration, Urban Development, Industries, Commerce in the government of Telangana. Armed with 2 postgraduate degrees, global exposure, rich professional experience, he's devoted his entire time to public service for the past decade and a half. He obviously played an active part in the coming into being the state of Telangana. The Honorable Minister, he's been a visionary, guiding force for not only technology platforms like Uber, but the entire industry. And as Mark rightly pointed out, both manufacturing and service sectors, and they're doing amazingly well in Telangana. Just give one example. When Dara, our CEO, met him in October last year, the minister actually encouraged us to undertake technological integration with public transportation as well. So we do stand committed to complementing public transport, working closely with the state, with the government, in providing first mile, last mile mobility solutions also. I also have the privilege and pleasure of introducing Sanjay Gupta, the Vice President and Country Head of Google India. He has an amazing career spanning nearly 3 decades and across varied sectors, media and entertainment, FMCG, telecom. In fact, he displays such deep consumer understanding, and this has helped him build strong brands. So I'll put a stop out there, and without further ado, I give you the Honorable Minister, Shri Rama Rao ji, in conversation with Sanjay Gupta. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you very much for this introduction. Good evening and good morning to everyone on the forum today. First, Minister Rama Rao, thank you to you for your time. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. All of us are really excited to hear from you. You are, as Rajiv and Mark said, a true visionary with an ability to understand the transformative power of technology. Since I have the benefit of your company, I want to take this opportunity to discuss a few themes emerging in the rapidly changing world we are living in. I want to discuss 4 themes. One is around investments into India to accelerate growth, coupled with the idea of self-reliance and ease of doing business. The second theme I'd like to touch upon is the skill development and education, especially leveraging the power of digital. The third area I'd like to spend time on is innovation and the role of startups for driving growth in India. And finally, assuming we have time, AI for good and how that can be useful for society. So let me jump straight into the first topic on investments and ease of doing business, Mr. Rama Rao. Over the last few weeks, the Honorable Prime Minister has been speaking about the idea of self-reliance and being vocal for local with great passion. He even mentioned it in his address at the USISPF forum yesterday. I think American companies can help drive this vision by enabling and accelerating the growth of the Indian economy, especially by leveraging the power of digital technologies. Since we are talking about economic growth and investments, I would be remiss if I didn't appreciate how excited we are about our growing presence in Telangana. In fact, if for all of you to know, we are building Google's largest campus outside of the US in Hyderabad. Mr. Rama Rao, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to your government for the support extended to us. We are excited to invest in Telangana and build up our engineering capacity in the state. I do believe, looking at Telangana as an example, that states can play a very important role in furthering this powerful idea of self-reliance that our Honorable Prime Minister has talked about. So let me first start by asking you, what is your view on how aligned states are to this vision? And how can states help further this vision?
Sanjay, thank you so much for this opportunity. In fact, to the entire team of USISPF, I'd also like to thank Mark Allen for his kind words and for all the business he's given us. Mark, starting from our conversation about, I think 4 years ago in the US, in Washington, D.C., to where we are now, I think we have traveled quite a path. Thank you so much for all your support all along. And I also want to thank Rajiv, Dara, and the entire team of Uber, for building their second largest base again outside of the United States, right here in Telangana. Now, Sanjay, going back to your point about Google building their second largest campus, you've just made my day, because a long list of names, starting now, of course, from Google, Uber, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and the list goes on, Salesforce, Novartis, all of these large multinational corporations today have the second largest base in Hyderabad in India, outside of their headquarters. Now, this in itself is a telling commentary on how attractive Hyderabad and India have been in terms of attracting investments to our state and our nation. Now, with respect to Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji's clarion call, for self-reliant India, of course, we are in conformity. In fact, we started off much ahead before any other state in India. About 6 years ago, under the leadership of our Honorable Chief Minister Shri K. Chandrasekhar Rao ji, we have launched an all-out, most attractive, gateway to Telangana, a policy called as the TS iPass. Like the Easy Pass in the US, we have this iPass, which basically stands for Industrial Project Approval Self-Certification System. Under this, in fact, Sanjay, unlike any other state in India, we promise self-certification system for our investors. So if you have a piece of land, you can start construction on day one, and no other state government in India so far will tell you this. We've been doing this for the last 6 years. Secondly, we promise deemed approvals. If you don't deliver on the single window promise in 15-day clearances, it's a deemed approval on the 16th day. And thirdly, most importantly, we take accountability rather seriously, and therefore, we even find the senior most of our bureaucrats. I have with me my industry secretary, industries and IT secretary, that's my classmate, and your classmate, of course, Jayesh Ranjan, who's a senior bureaucrat. He's been in the government for the last 28 years. And even a senior bureaucrat like Jayesh, in spite of being your friend, will not be spared if he actually becomes a roadblock, so to speak. Not that he's ever been, but even he will not be spared, and he will be levied a fine of rupees 1,000 per day. Now, that's the kind of bold, progressive reforms that India really needs if we have to compete on a global scale. We've done this 6 years ago, which has catapulted us into the top league on the ease of doing business rankings in India. And we continue to raise the bar for the rest of India. I'm proud to share this with you, Sanjay, that we not only have brought in bold reforms, we've also ensured that we are agile. We call ourselves a startup state. We operate with the bent of mind of a startup. We are a very, very agile state. And therefore, what we end up doing very often is we end up delivering more than what we promise. And I'm delighted that not only in information technology, life sciences, aerospace and defense, textiles, we continue to lead the country in a number of other sectors also. One thing I would like to convey to this forum that is listening in, and to all the members of USISPF, if you're looking at India, my request to you is, please do not look at us through the prism of New Delhi. Please do not look at us through the prism of the government of India only. You have to remember, India is a federal republic. It's a very heterogeneous country. Everything changes every 200 kilometers in India. The language, the dialect, the cuisine, the culture, the governance, everything changes every 200 kilometers. The real action when it comes to investment scenario is in the states. It lies with the states. While government of India broadly is responsible for foreign policy, the trade policy, etc., the real action, the land allocation, the power, the financial incentives, skilling, innovation, all of this actually vests with the state. So please engage with the states like Telangana. Please engage to understand how progressive, in fact, the states in India are. If we were to, in fact, be rated on a global scale as a separate entity, I would definitely say this with a lot of confidence. We would be in the top 20, if not the top 10, on the ease of doing business rankings. Now, not only in terms of offering value, not only in terms of offering fantastic human resources, India and Telangana in particular, in fact, has also been raising the benchmark on innovation. In fact, I'm proud to share with you that we believe in disrupting existing legacy processes even in the government. Government in Telangana, in fact, is the first customer to number of startups. I know we're going to talk about innovation in a bit, Sanjay, but I would like to point out, we launched India's largest technology incubator, called the T-Hub, 5 years ago. Sometime later this year, toward the last part of the year, we'll also be launching the world's largest technology incubator, the phase 2 of T-Hub, called as the Reactor. So we continue to raise the bar on innovation, and we believe in inclusive growth. We've launched a separate incubator for women entrepreneurs. We also have launched a number of incubators cutting across different verticals. We collaborate with the industry. We also collaborate with academia and research institutions in Hyderabad and Telangana, which fosters the overall ecosystem innovation to happen and thrive. We also partner with large corporates to encourage not only startups to innovate, ecosystem innovation, we also partner with the large corporates also to encourage innovation among them. So I can go on and on, but I think the key to looking at India really is start engaging more with the states, start looking at how better, they have shaped up in the last, 6-7 years or more so in the last 1 decade, and continue to engage with progressive states like Telangana is what I would say.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Rama Rao. That is fabulous to hear. And I must thank you for your leadership in driving a lot of these things. If I could say, this is you're providing the ABCD of the change, A being agility, B being bold reforms, C being courage to challenge status quo, and D being driving inclusive growth. So I think really you are setting the standard for most of the states to learn from. Let me switch gears and ask you, as you know, Google, we're very excited about investing in India. Our CEO, Mr. Sundar Pichai, recently renewed our commitment to India and announced the $10 billion digitization fund, which will be invested over the next 5 to 7 years. And the fund will be used to enable better access by cheap or high quality, affordable smartphones, unique solutions in local languages, and working on local problems that haven't been solved as yet in India. And I think all companies represented here feel the excitement about India and are willing to commit resources to build the idea of self-reliance. However, this requires, in our minds, 2 key enablers. One, which you talked about, ease of doing business, and 2, a sense of regulatory certainty. The Honorable Commerce Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, talked about this at length a few days ago in this forum as well. So I would like to ask you, what are the steps the government can take? And I'm broadening the question beyond Telangana as well, to promote a stable and progressive regulatory regime and create a conducive environment for businesses to thrive.
Well, Sanjay, I'm glad you pointed out, the ease of doing business and how potentially, states actually having, kind of indulging in a healthy sort of competition is going to be good for a self-reliant India. And Telangana, to that effect, has been doing its bit by coming out with very, very innovative policies. When I say policy, it's not just a government order that we have issued when it came to TSI Pass. In fact, TSI Pass is a legislation that is backed by statute by the legislature. Now that leads to the next point about policy certainty. When governments change in a democracy, typically, we sometimes tend to see a bit of wavering between policies. But to ensure that no such thing happens in Telangana, we have brought in a legislation like TSI Pass, backed completely by statute. Now that's extremely important for you to understand, because for a government, for any subsequent government, in future, to be able to touch or to be able to tamper with, any positive act or positive legislation which has been welcomed by the industry or welcomed by people at large is going to be that much more difficult, because in a democracy, ultimately, it's the people's will that will prevail. So therefore, I think it's a combination of both, a combination of good, rock solid policy on the ease of doing business and how easy you can, you can make it for the investors to come in and invest. And not only on the ease of doing business, in fact, Sanjay, I would also like to say, while we've been on the top of the charts on the ease of doing business, it's equally important from our perspective to also focus on reducing the cost of doing business in India, to also focus on improving the quality of doing business in India, and simultaneously, as we pointed out, to ensure policy certainty is in place. We also have to make sure that all of our key legislations are backed by statute and also by larger public approval, so that no subsequent government can actually afford to tamper with. But having said that, We've seen numerous instances in Telangana, in India, where some governments have done this in the past. I can assure you, the last 6 years, and also looking forward to the next 4 years, I can assure you, Sanjay, that we have possibly one of the most stable governments and also able leadership led by our Honorable Chief Minister, Shri KCRG. And therefore, we've been able to attract, like Mark Allen pointed out, more than $25 billion of investment in the last 6 years and some marquee names to our state. Of course, while we are proud of what we've achieved, there is immense potential again to do more. And toward that effect, again, at the risk of sounding repetitive, let me again request the USISPF partners and members to engage with our state directly offline and also via USISPF to know more and to learn more and to invest, to find out more investment opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really powerful thought that you have in backing reform with strong statute in place. And that really makes it really, in terms of certainty, it really changes the trajectory of that very, very dramatically. So let me, Mr. Rama Rao, switch gears and talk about skilling and education. As all of us know, we are living through unprecedented times. The pandemic has posed entirely new challenges, especially for children whose routines have been completely disrupted. At Google, we realized early that there is an urgent need for digitization in the education sector to ensure children can continue their learning uninterrupted even during the pandemic. But from whatever studies have been done by many people in the country, we realize that very few students and teachers are able to continue the learning experience in completeness today. We at Google are partnering with CBSE to train 1 million teachers in digital tools by the end of 2020. And we are also partnering with the Maharashtra government to ensure that 23 million students in Maharashtra and teachers get access to Google's education offerings free of cost. But I do think there is a long way to go to enable digital education for more than 300 million kids in this country. The private sector is trying and innovating in the area of education tech in a very hectic pace. At the same time, there have been sweeping reforms introduced by the central government in the education sector with the recently announced National Education Policy. I know that skilling has been a big focus for you, Mr. Rama Rao. So what are your thoughts on this changing landscape and how governments, both at state and center, can enable skilling and education and transform that for growth and driving growth for the country and economy?
Sanjay, what makes India very attractive to the world today is the large think force and workforce we have to offer. While the world is aging, India is getting younger. More than 65% of our population has a median age of 31. Now, that's a staggering statistic considering we are 1.3 plus billion people. Having said that, if we really have to retain this edge, if India really has to retain this edge and continue to provide solutions and products for the rest of the world, what do we need to do? Like you pointed out, more than 300 million children who could potentially be underprivileged and who may not have the most, high-tech access, so to speak, to tech gadgets or otherwise. In my humble opinion, Sanjay, I think we need to do three things. Firstly, Indian government recently has come out with a legislation which allows even states and other private entities to own satellites and to send satellites into the orbit, into space. Now, this is going to be a huge opportunity for governments. There's going to be a huge opportunity for private sector to engage in and engage with. Because today, through my state TSAT, as we call it, the Telangana's satellite education outreach program through satellite, we have two dedicated channels, which are reaching nearly 5+ million households in our state. But am I happy with that? Not really. Could we do more? Of course, yes. How do I do it? Today, I'm relying on Government of India's satellites. Tomorrow, in my humble opinion, we ought to be looking at sending our own satellites into the space and ensuring that we have enough options and enough opportunities for our young children to be able to broadcast and beam directly into their drawing rooms and into their smartphones to each and every child. That's the first thing we ought to be doing, thinking big, thinking bold. Secondly, let me also point out, Sanjay, that while we have focused on English as a medium of education, I think it's equally important for us to realize India is a very heterogeneous country. We have 22 official languages, 300+ unofficial languages. A company like Google, really. In fact, since you're partnering with various state governments, I would really encourage you to start dabbling more in vernacular languages. Telugus across the world. There are more than, I think, 12 crore Telugus across the world. That's a huge population. It's larger than many countries across the world. We ought to be looking at solutions even in vernacular languages. It just can't be about English or Hindi. Likewise, we also need to be engaging with students from a very young age when it comes to emerging technologies. AI, ML, robotics, innovation at large. We have to be catching our children young. We have to be encouraging them from a very young age so that we actually are able to progress further. The other point I would like to make, the biggest challenge today in India, especially after COVID, has been ability of governments and government institutions to adopt to technology. Today, in fact, if anybody needs upskilling and reskilling, I think firstly it's the government sector. It's governments, ministers, bureaucrats, teachers, government employees. In fact, we ought to be upskilling ourselves first to be able to gear up for this challenge. Unfortunately, we have not done that in the past, but now this adversity actually has thrown up an opportunity. We need to be upskilling ourselves. And lastly, let me point out on skilling. We have a dedicated institution called as the Telangana Academy for Skill and Knowledge, called as the TASK. Now, TASK has been partnering with industry in a big way, with academia in a big way, and has been training and skilling hundreds of thousands of students over the last 5-6 years. But I think we could be doing a lot more. We could be working with agencies like NASSCOM, CII, FICCI, etc., the large industry bodies. We could also be looking at options where countries like Germany have been extremely successful. In fact, up until 3 or 4 years ago, Germany has been the largest exporter in the world. In fact, one of the prime reasons why I believe they have been able to achieve that metric is because they have this wonderful program where students actually get course credits even when they work in the industry. We need to be involving ourselves, involving our children more in apprenticeship models. We need to be giving them an option to work while they study and also giving them course credits while they do it. The dual degree programs, as they call them in Germany, is something that India needs to emulate. So skilling, vernacular focus, again, bold reforms in the government sector, upskilling our own government employees and trainers. All of these are opportunities that we need to leverage if we really have to make our mark during these tough times and also going forward down the road with the new education policy as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rama Rao. That's a very insightful view. I really like the idea that you talked about I think, which is very disruptive, of launching satellites and ensuring beaming through channels. And that could be a very cost-effective way to get education to every kid in different parts of the country. I must also tell you that as Google, we are really committed on languages. And we recently launched, I think a few quarters back, a product called Google Bolo, which is all around teaching kids to learn language by interacting with it, which comes in 8 Indian languages, including Telugu. And that we have recently taken global into multiple languages across the world as Google Read Along now. So I completely agree with you, and we will partner with you to see how we can drive languages even harder in the future.
And Sanjay, Jayesh is pointing out that Google Bolo, in fact, was developed in Hyderabad, and we could even call it Google Cheppu, which means in Telugu, Bolo. So
that is true. I think our engineers in Hyderabad who developed Google Bolo. So I fully agree with Jayesh. And thank you, Jayesh, for his leadership and partnership with Google and industry at large. Let me switch topics now to innovation and role of startups, Mr. Rama Rao. I think, as you know, India has more than 60 million SMBs in this country. However, the contribution of these SMBs to our GDP is less than 30%. And if you compare it to US, the contribution of SMBs there is close to 60%. Now, the challenge in India has been that the quality of services delivered and access to capital has been limited. And I do think in this new world, which is getting digitally connected, both these issues can be managed by driving digitally enablement, both from a quality point of view and access to capital perspective. Now, new age digital startups can fuel innovation, solve some of the big challenges India faces today, which have not yet been solved, and spur economic growth. In your government, Jayesh and team have been very focused on enabling startups and driving innovation. So what are your thoughts around, Mr. Rama Rao, on states being a catalyst of change to promote innovation in India and the growth of startups, because they can be the biggest game changer for driving economic growth and building a stronger digital economy in this country?
Well, Sanjay, like I pointed out, in fact, about 5+ years ago in November 2015, we had launched T-Hub, which is India's largest technology incubator. Now, from T-Hub, I'm happy to share with you, we've been able to create several success stories, and we've also been able to create, again, as you pointed out, the ecosystem innovation and also the catalytical cascading effect that is much desired. Now, not just in Hyderabad, which is a large metro, which is the capital city of Telangana, we've also been able to, in fact, encourage T-Hub to open its own charters in the tier 2 cities to encourage social innovation and more rural innovation and even innovation in tier 2 towns. Because I am a firm believer that children and students and youngsters from tier 2 cities have a lot more fire in their belly than the kids from metros. And I'm not saying this with I hope I'm not sounding very condescending when I say this, but nevertheless, I believe very strongly that they have more fire in their belly. They want to prove a point to the rest of the world that they're as good, if not better. Having said that, while T-Hub has been a great success, we also believe in inclusive growth. So we launched a number of initiatives, again, to ensure that all sections of the society are given an equal opportunity on the innovation front. So we've launched a V-Hub, which is a Women Entrepreneur Hub, to ensure that women entrepreneurs are encouraged and also their startups are also nurtured. Likewise, we launched a very, very unique program, Sanjay, which is possibly one of its kind in the entire country, called as the TSIC, the Telangana State Innovation Cell. We are possibly one of the few states in India which has a Chief Innovation Officer. The goal of TSIC, the Telangana State Innovation Cell, is to catch them young. So we go to high schools, we go to rural innovators, we look at their products, we conduct exhibitions, we conduct workshops, we ensure that their prototypes they build are given an opportunity, if they are, sound, if they're really good in terms of proof of concept, we give them an opportunity, not just in terms of being able to showcase in the state capital, but also to be able to build a prototype and also scale up eventually. We, in fact, like I pointed out, the Telangana government, more often than not, ends up being their first customer. We give them a priority in terms of being there, giving them business as well. So a comprehensive approach, I think, in terms of innovation, where we have innovators from different parts of the state, inclusive opportunities for them, likewise catching them young from a high school stage, and then nurturing them so that enterprise becomes a culture and not necessarily a discouragement of sorts, because typically in India, children are groomed in such a way that they are forced either to end up as a doctor or an engineer. Now that cultural change that has to happen, the behavioral change, the societal change that has to happen, has to come out and has to be drawn out over a period of time. To encourage that and to actually make the curve steeper, we are trying to actually go right to the grassroots, to the schools. Likewise, in terms of funding, we have been doing our bit, and we've been trying to, in fact, encourage large number of VCs and private equity players also to set shop in Hyderabad and Telangana. And also from the government side, we've been giving small grants, but we can do more. We should be doing more. And I do believe that the scope to do is immense, and you're only limited by your imagination on the innovation index. I'm a firm believer, Sanjay, in one theory, the 3I mantra, as I call it: innovation, infrastructure, inclusive growth. I think that is what will propel India into the next orbit, and no state in India is an exception. We just can't be happy being self-reliant. We also have to start producing solutions for the rest of the world. So therefore, this 3I mantra is what I keep espousing. And Telangana, while it has moved up significantly on the innovation index, I'm not happy with where we are. We still have to do a lot more.
Thank you. I think I really find the idea of exciting and inspiring young minds to become entrepreneurs, because that's a powerful shift that will create in the society. And I'll urge members who are listening into this to see how we can partner you and many more state governments to champion this and really grow that and make it big for this country. Let me switch gears to AI, which is a topic which is very close to your heart. I'm also here, and I'm really pleased to hear that you've declared 2020 as the year of AI in the state of Telangana. And that's a wonderful initiative. We all recognize that there is great potential for the use of AI in India. In fact, when Sundar Pichai, our CEO, and I met the Honorable Prime Minister in July, the Prime Minister spoke passionately about the need to tackle problem in India's agriculture sector, with AI. At Google, we think there is an immense potential to apply new technologies like AI, big data, and predictive analysis to the problems being faced by our farmers. It is a country where agriculture employs 50% of our people and contributes only 15% to our GDP. Mr. Rama Rao, given your experience and thought leadership in this field, what role do you see AI playing in the development of the agricultural sector?
Broadly, if I have to say, I think Telangana, again, in agriculture, not only in innovation, information technology, we are a leader today in agriculture. I'm proud to share this statistic with you, Sanjay. In fact, Telangana, in terms of expansion of acreage, in terms of cultivation this year, has stood number one in the country at 39% over the last year. Now, our Honorable Chief Minister has been driving this idea of regulated farming, of crop colonies, eventually leading to crop colonies across the state. And also there are a number of other schemes, pioneering initiatives, which have taken off and which have been adopted by Telangana farmers, which have been embraced by Telangana farmers, if I have to say, very, very well. Now, how can we leverage technology for the benefit of farmers? Our Honorable Chief Minister always alludes to one comment. Whenever we talk about any fancy technology, any cool technology, he always asks one question. He asks us, me and Jayesh, how is this relevant to the common man? How is it going to bring about a societal impact? Can you give me an instance? Can you give me an example? So that has always been the guiding force, that has always been the guiding principle in which we've always adopted new technologies. Coming to AI and agriculture, Sanjay, as you pointed out, climatic conditions, soil conditions, crops, incidents of pest, all of this can be predicted provided we have data sets. In fact, back in 2016, Sanjay, we brought out what is called as open data policy in government of Telangana. Across 18 government sectors, across 18 government departments, we have hundreds of data sets which are available in a machine readable format for anybody who wants to work with us. Now, the reason why I point out is today in agriculture, we can leverage not only the best practices, not only the typical problems, not only predict the market outcomes, when to harvest, when to sell, when would you get a proper price, when should you sow, what are the typical pests that you would infect. All of these problems, typical problems today that farmers face in India, can be handled through AI. And I'm a big fan of artificial intelligence, and more particularly, the ability for AI to predict and come out with proper solutions for our farmers and also for the governments. Not only in agriculture. In fact, if I have to extend a bit further, today the world is yet to come to terms with this pandemic, COVID-19. We have partnered with Public Health Foundation of India. We've partnered with Intel and a local institution here called as the IIIT Hyderabad in developing a solution, AI-based solution, to also predict and also work on future pandemics and future seasonal outbreaks so that we can actually contain them, if not completely eradicate them, predict them, contain them to the best of our abilities. So AI, again, I can go on, but it's a huge tool, huge opportunity that India cannot miss out on. Starting from our farmers to people at large, for law and order, the number of applications of AI to urban, development that I can go on about. But for agriculture, I think it's a godsend, and we could certainly, Telangana could be the leader with partners like Google, with partners like others who are listening in. We would be happy to partner, and we'd be willing to, like I said, give you an opportunity to develop solutions and products, proof of concepts right here, field experiments, scaling up opportunities, etc., etc. Everything can be done right here in Telangana, where we've already declared year 2020 as the year of AI.
That's right. Now, thank you for those wonderful insights, Mr. Rama Rao. It's heartening to hear that the great strides that Telangana is taking on promoting agriculture innovation to help its farmers. I'm also glad that you mentioned something about other areas, because I do think water management is an interesting area in which AI has and can be deployed. Just a few days ago, we announced as Google a flood forecasting system that covers now all of India and really delivers and notifies in advance people in a very, very close proximity down to a street to tell them when they could expect water to rise up and impact their home or society. And that has been deployed widely in Bihar and Assam floods to millions of people in the country right now. So I'm sure there are many examples of AI that could be used to solve unique problems. But if I was to ask you, that beyond agriculture that you talked about, if there is one area that you'd like Google or other people who are listening in and focus on one more area, what would that your ask and request be to the technology industry that is listening in today?
Well, obviously, what's on top of our minds today, what's on top of everybody's mind today is healthcare and improving our healthcare sector. I think governments across the world have no choice but to invest over the next decade and a half in beefing up our public infrastructure. I think governments across the world, irrespective of whether you're first world, second world, or third world, we have all been woefully exposed in terms of our medical inadequacies on the infrastructure front. So ramping up our infrastructure, ramping up our abilities to predict, ramping up our abilities to contain, ramping up our abilities to actually effectively understand the problem is something that we've been sort of having a difficult time with over the last 9 months. But if there is one area beyond agriculture that I think is important at this current juncture, it would have to be healthcare. Like I said, I'm soliciting partners from across the USISPF board, whoever is listening in, whoever is participating in this. Telangana will be that guinea pig, so to speak. If you would like to come forward and partner with us, more than happy to have an offline conversation with you. You can reach us directly to me or Jayesh, or you could even connect to us through USISPF.
Thank you. I think thank you. And I'm sure all of us will be really excited to see how we can partner you beyond agriculture into health. I think that's a big need for the country at large. If you are fine, we are in the last 5 minutes. If I could switch gears and ask you something more personal, in especially to do with pandemic, actually. So as you know, you have been a reader and a driver of technology in a big way. You worked professionally in organizations before, and you're doing a very different role today. The thing that we see across the industry, that a lot of people find that during pandemic, the amount of effort and time that they're putting into their roles has actually gone up. And therefore, they're spending more time in front of screen, which is causing, besides high improvement in productivity, also a lot of stress. So if I could ask you, do you get stressed in these times? And what do you do to really manage the stress, if at all, that you get into?
Well, Sanjay, this is going to be a tricky question to answer. I think all of us are under tremendous stress, even normal times, leave alone COVID times, today's work-life balance. In fact, when people ask me, how do you manage a work-life balance? I keep telling them, what balance? There's no balance whatsoever. So these are stressful times we live in. There is immense pressure. But nevertheless, I think I'm a firm believer in one thing, that adversities actually throw up opportunities. See, when COVID hit India in late February, early March, we were all worried as to how we would cope. Our large IT industry in Hyderabad, more than 600,000 employees, how would we ensure that they deliver to their global customers? I'm happy to share with you, Sanjay, our infrastructure has come to our rescue, and we've done rather well in terms of ensuring that all SLAs have been met across the world. But having said that, I think, and this is my personal opinion only, please don't get me wrong, at a personal level, I feel that the world has really spooked itself. If you look at the fatalities, if you look at the overall recovery rates, India has done tremendously well. More than 75% of the people have recovered. The fatality is less than 1.5%. And but for the fact that now the world has gone into a fear psychosis, I think it's time for all of us to return to work, start coexisting with this virus, like many other microbes, like the seasonal flus, like typhoid, like malaria, like anything else. I think it's time for us to move on, start changing the narrative. I think it's time for us to start working on how we can bring back people to work, how we can ensure that we start building on a positive momentum to change the narrative for people to come back and face the situation as is. Because I don't see a solution for the next 6 to 9 months. Does that mean that we will continue to live in a shell and not get out? I think we ought to be going out. We ought to be dealing with this. We ought to realize that if we get infected, early detection and ensuring that we follow what our medical practitioners tell us is going to help us, because fatality is low, the recovery is high. Let's, I think, get out of the negative mindset and start looking at the silver lining around the dark cloud.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I must compliment you and the central government led by our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi. I think we've done a fabulous job in terms of scaling up testing, ensuring that we are providing in a very resource-starved country good health support, and therefore the fatalities are really, really low. And I think, as you rightly said, we need to learn to live with COVID and find ways to ensure that we fight it while we get the livelihood back and the growth back in the country. So I must say we are reaching the end of our session, Mr. Rama Rao. Thank you for a really, really insightful and engaging conversation. I really like the 3 I's that you talked about of innovation, infrastructure, and inclusive growth. And I must say, what Telangana has delivered, as I started by saying ABCD, which is agility, bold reforms, I think courage to challenge status quo, and delivering inclusive growth. And I do compliment you and your team for really encouraging industry to find a home in Telangana. So thank you once again for your leadership and for your very insightful session.
Thank you so much, Sanjay, for the opportunity. Thank you to all the members of USISPF. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Sanjay, and thank you, everybody who's been listening in. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.